An economy is a living, breathing thing, and it has seasons. It has ups and downs. And over the last 3 or 4 years, I've been there seeing it go into a deep spin, spiral dive, and come straight back out again. And after a period of intense shocks to not just the global economy, but our economy. We had COVID, obviously. Then we had these inflation surges and the big rises in interest rates. And then we had the horrible floods at the beginning of the year. It's time to, after the dust has settled somewhat, think about how the economy's going. And for the last 3 or 4 years, I've regularly sat down with Jarrod Kerr, the chief economist at Kiwibank, to shoot the breeze, chew the fat on what's happening with the economy. It's been an extraordinary ride. So I decided to have a chat with Jarrod again because summer is coming. It turns out from his visits around the Motu that people are feeling a bit more confident. We can see it in the housing market. It's not quite there yet. Certainly the interest rate shocks have surprised a few people. But we learn this week in When the Facts Change with Jarrod Kerr all about what happens going into the summer. Hopefully, as El Nino arrives, the winter goes away and life starts to return to the economy again. This week on When the Facts Change. Well, kia ora to Jarrod Kerr, who is in here from Kiwibank as the chief economist. It's like getting the gang back together to have a good old rumble around in the economy. Great to see you here in the Spinoff studios.
Kia ora, Bernard, and thanks for having me back.
Yeah, there's plenty on the go at the moment. We've just had the pre-election fiscal economic update to give us an idea of what the government thinks about where the economy's going. The dust is settling now after all those rate hikes over the last year. And consumers are changing the way they're doing things. Firstly, let's start off with how consumers are feeling. Jarrod, what are you seeing through your card spending stats and now the dust's settling? You know, what are people doing?
There's still a lot of caution out there in spending habits. So, you know, we went through a period where we spent quite a lot of money. Coming out of COVID, we spent a lot of money on our homes. We spent a lot of money on, furnishing our homes. That seems to have finished. As of late last year, spending on big ticket items really has come off and come off quite a lot. So I think the cost of living crisis is very real and we can see it. You know, people are spending more on groceries, but less on other things. So, spending on necessities is rising and, a lot of that is fueled by inflation and nothing else. And other things have been cut back on. So, households are cautious. We have spent a lot of time on the road recently going around the regions and there is a hint of optimism out there, which is interesting because I haven't seen that in a long time. There is a sense that things will get better next year, which is good, and a lot of looking to the election. And regardless of who they're voting for, they're kind of hoping for either change or more of the same to support their bias.
And the other big change that's happened in the last year or so is the population. Lots of migration. This week we heard 96,200 net migrants coming into the country in the last year, which is a record high. How has the migration surge flowed through into our economy and the figures?
Well, I don't think it has yet. I think there may be elements of it beneath the surface. People have been coming here for months now, and that's a very big number that you mentioned. I mean, that is a record number of people coming in 1 year, and more people is more demand for everything, right? They come here, they need a house, either a rental or they want to buy, so it's putting a bit of pressure on the housing market. They want a car, they want this, they want that. It adds demand for everything. So I think the numbers are stronger than what they would otherwise be, but the numbers are still weak. So I don't think we've seen the full force of that migrant intake. It is complicating the outlook somewhat because we look at migration through two lenses. First of all, we think, hey, there's more people to take the jobs that have been vacant for a very long time. Tick, that's great, and that puts downward pressure on wages. On the other hand, we have not built for these people. We do not have the infrastructure for these people. We do not have the services for these people, and we definitely don't have the houses. So you bring 100,000 people in, you need to build at least 40,000 homes. We're not doing that. Residential building is coming off. Consents are coming off at precisely the wrong time. We really need to be doing more on the supply side of our economy.
And so what's that imbalance between the supply and demand doing to prices of houses, but also rents?
Well, it's in its infancy. So I think we'll see over the summer period, over spring and summer, I think we'll see a lot more activity in housing. And I think we'll see upward pressure on prices. And some of that will be attributed to more people having migrated here, which, that's great. But, as I said, all of our problems in our housing market are supply side problems. We simply don't have enough. And until we properly address that, then we're going to keep focusing on the demand and saying, we should try and, rein in demand. Well, no.
How do we solve this supply side issue? Because, it's been something politicians and economists and commentatory people like me have been hammering away at for seems like decades now, but we still haven't got anywhere close to it.
Yeah, and I've been right there with you, Bernard, the whole way. My fist is beaten up from pounding the table over the years. But, put simply, it starts with infrastructure. So we need to not only maintain the infrastructure that we have, which we're not doing, but we need to build infrastructure for a bigger New Zealand tomorrow. And that takes a lot of money. It takes some long-term thinking, not 3-yearly election cycle thinking. It takes long-term thinking. We have oodles of land and we have ample ability to intensify, but we're not doing it. So until we can actually really think about how we can unlock land and areas to be built on, we're just not going to get there. And then there's the modern technologies. I mean, we don't even have to invent anything. It's all been done overseas. These modular homes or prefabricated homes. The answers are there. They're doing it in Australia, and if the Aussies can do it, then geez, we can do it. That's the answer. But the pushback I get speaking to developers, even the Kayangaoras of our world. They need scale. So in order to go down this prefabricated route, you'd need to set up quite a decent size, factory, and you would need to be turning over 1,000 homes a year, according to the builders that I speak to. These very large New Zealand builders only deal with sort of 200 to 300 homes a year, which is a lot, but we are a nation built up of many small builders rather than a few large builders.
It's one of the stunning things about our economy that just about everywhere else there's been a consolidation and a creation of scale in banking, in supermarkets, in fuel retailing, even in media. But somehow in house building, construction and development, we've got a sea of relatively small players who are producing, I think the largest market player would have single-digit percentage share of the market, whereas in every other industry, they'd have 20 or 30 or 60 in the case of insurance.
Yeah, absolutely. And, my wife and I built a place up in Mangawhai. We got a guy who was pretty much a ute and two other workers with him. He did an exceptional job, but he wanted to take all that profit, and you can understand why. He can do it, and he can take the profit rather than reporting into some larger entity. But unfortunately, in order to truly get the scale that we do need this larger entity to get that economies of scale, which is an economist's way of saying the bigger you are, the cheaper things become.
Yeah, and we're not seeing those sort of the benefits of scale and technology that you see in, say, consumer electronics or telecommunications or even in some of the electrical equipment that we see. Just stepping back from the broader structural issues, given that we seem to be struggling to deal with those, the result is that both the government and the Reserve Bank have to look at the cards that are played in front of them. The Reserve Bank has stopped putting up interest rates for now. What's your view on, where we go through the end of the year and into next year on the Reserve Bank interest rate front?
Well, I think they've done enough, and I think they know they've done enough. They've told us there are risks both ways. There are risks that they might have to hike again, I get it, and there are risks that they might have to cut, I get it, and actually that's what I think they will do. But their sort of central scenario that they're telling us is, at the moment, we're going to keep interest rates high for a long period of time, just to make sure that we break the back of the inflation beast and we get it back down to 2%. Okay, I get it. But what we're seeing is, quite a substantial slowdown already. Half of our mortgage book has rolled off onto much higher interest rates. We've already recorded a technical recession. The second half of our book is rolling off over the next 6 months. We think we will record another technical recession on the back of that. So we're going to be going into next year with, nearly 18 months of, very weak to contractions in economic activity, and inflation in that world should be beaten. And I think the Reserve Bank will have enough information by May next year that they may come in and start cutting interest rates. And that's the next big move, I think, for interest rates. And it'll be next year, and you'll see, mortgage rates going from the 7s to the 6s to the 5s as they look to normalise policy, which means, take it back down to something which is nowhere near as restrictive, but certainly not stimulatory.
Because there must be a whole bunch of people in that second half of the mortgage book who are looking to roll shortly and going, "Ooh, I wonder if I'm going to hold on until the rates start falling."
Yeah. I mean, there are most mortgage holders have had their mortgage for quite a while, and we're not really worried about them. They've been in the game for years. What we're worried about are those that have come into the market quite recently, and those that came into the market and were given a 2-point-something% mortgage rate. Now, they made decisions on that rate. We told them it was very low at the time, and we told them that they're likely to rise. But you know what people are like. They take the price, it's 2-point-whatever%, and now many people are surprised that it's 7+%. So are we, to be honest. We didn't think it was going to rise this far. That is a massive shock to many households, right? You got an $800,000 mortgage. You were paying $20,000 interest on it. Now you're paying $50,000. Where are you finding that extra $30,000? We've tested you at 6.5%, right? So you should be able to pay up to there. But should and are very different, right? You are now paying that higher rate. That money's got to come from somewhere, and we're seeing it in the spending data. We're also seeing it in small businesses, right? Small businesses are quite cautious right now.
In New Zealand, we have this history of not seeing a real flow through of people not being able to pay their mortgages and then that flowing into the housing market. Unlike in the United States, 2007, 2008, where in some states you were able to send the keys back to the bank to make sure that you didn't get stuck with a house that was worth less than your mortgage. New Zealand has different laws apart from anything else, but also a real reluctance to go there. And it's interesting that even though there's been such a shock, and you're right, some small businesses have really struggled, we haven't seen the mortgagee sales or the, mass cascading, closures that you might have seen in another economy at another time.
Yeah, it's hard to compare us to the United States, particularly, prior to 2007. There was a lot of dodgy practices going on over there. They were giving mortgages to people that, shouldn't have had them, right? The creation of credit was far too easy, far too cheap. We have full recourse loans here, which is very different, right? Very different. And people, choose to fight tooth and nail to pay off their mortgage before just about anything else, right? So they'll cut spending on just about everything. What we need to see is actually quite a sharp increase in unemployment. So people will fight tooth and nail as long as they got a job. But when you see a lift in the unemployment rate, well, you're going to the bank and you're saying, I no longer have a job. Bank turns to you and says, well, there's a lot of things we can do to help you through. But, after 6 months, we start sort of saying, well, we're running out of options here. That's when you see the lift in defaults, when people have been unemployed for a significant period of time. We can defer payments, we can do lots of things. But if you can't, get a job, well, unfortunately, you end up defaulting.
And just thinking back over the last 3 or 4 years, you and I have had lots of discussions about the economy. It's extraordinary times. I mean, no one would have thought at the beginning of COVID that we'd have an unemployment rate with a 3 in front of it, 2-3 years down the track. And it seems to me all around the world, one of the astonishing things about these shocks that we've had, not just with COVID, but then rising interest rates, has been that unemployment has stayed remarkably low and employment growth just keeps on powering on. We're seeing it in the United States and Australia and definitely here. And that's one of the reasons why the whole economy has been so resilient. What's going on in the labour market that means unemployment's staying so low and we just keep creating new jobs?
I think what we've learnt, we already knew it, but what we had to learn so that other people knew it is that fiscal policy works. It really does. It's really quite powerful. After 2008, we saw a lot of monetary policy response. So monetary policy response being, let's slash interest rates to near zero or negative in parts. Let's print money to make sure that all interest rates in the economy are really, really low. So that worked. But what we found out over COVID is that when you do that and then the government comes out and sprays money around at the same time, well, that is a potent cocktail of policy. And, we really did see a shunt higher in demand. There were supply issues that sort of started and then magnified the inflation issues that we've got now. But we cannot forget the fact that both monetary policy and fiscal policy working hand in hand really pushed our demand higher. And I think that the wage subsidies clearly worked, and that sort of goes into your point around the labour market. But the labour market has held up quite well because we have, stimulated so well out of COVID.
It was like we strapped on a turbocharger and then decided, right, we're going to have the nitrous oxide as well, and off we went. Now that we're through COVID, we're not through the higher interest rates, but the economy is still in a reasonably strong position. It's worth looking out past the borders to the rest of the world. There's stuff happening out there as well. Some parts of the world are doing better than others. We're all watching what happens to the US Federal Reserve because that sets the base for all of our interest rates. What are you keeping an eye on in the coming months going into next year overseas?
Yeah, so I actually start overseas in my world. New Zealand's a very small, just like Australia, very small, open economy, heavily influenced by what's going on overseas. What our trading partners do is key for us. And our trading partners, well, their growth has slowed quite dramatically, particularly China with the issues they have in their property markets. But, in general, Chinese growth is very subdued. They're going into, a new era of lower growth. We need to look to India as our next major trading partner. We really need to focus on India. But hey, let's talk about the hands that we've been dealt now. Our trading partner growth has slowed a lot, and we're seeing this in dairy prices having come off, meat prices, logs, all of the above. The demand for the stuff that we pull out of the ground or grow on top of it has come off. So that's not good. The New Zealand dollar is falling, and will fall further. So that'll help exporters for a while. But I'm looking at global growth, Bernard, earlier. I'm looking at our trading partner growth and seeing how that's likely to evolve from here. And it looks like a very slow to mild recovery at best. You mentioned the United States. They're doing reasonably well. They've got a very tight labour market. Their inflation rate's fallen from 9 to 3.2, 3.6. They're heading in the right direction, but there are other parts of the world that aren't. So it's quite a mixed picture offshore, and it's not that supportive of our economy at the moment.
Just coming back home and into the regions, you've just put out a regional report. What parts of New Zealand are doing better or worse than the rest?
Well, it seems that the South Island's doing a little better than the North. We're getting higher scores based on the actual hard data that we've got in the regions, but also the anecdotes that we're hearing, a little bit more optimism out of the South Island compared to the North. But I have noted that across many regions, there is optimism starting to pick up, which was a bit of a surprise to us. And I think it's linked to the housing market. People think, house prices are bottoming here. And most people are of the opinion that house prices will pick up. And any National supporters out there are of the opinion that National will change things in a way that will, help house prices even further. So I think that's even, feeding into the conversations.
Jarrod Kerr, the Chief Economist at Kiwibank, thank you very much for coming in to When the Facts Change. Great to see you in the studio for another romp around the global and local macroeconomy.